Greetings at Cheating Story Lab. Once you've finished viewing, pass this tale on to someone who might find it enlightening. Previously, I thought marriage signified constructing something jointly. Now, I understand it can mean waiting for the perfect instant to retrieve everything. I am Gerald, and here is the account of how I allowed my wife to devastate our marriage while I silently safeguarded the one secret she never suspected. For 8 years, I was everything Whitney desired. A consistent job as a logistics coordinator, not particularly remarkable income-wise. I managed the finances, she handled the social engagements. We possessed the suburban home, 2 cars, envy-inducing vacation snapshots that made our peers green with envy. On paper, we functioned. However, I sensed something was amiss 2 years before she filed for divorce. It began with the gym membership. Suddenly, Whitney started attending prolonged morning workouts and later concealed her expensive athletic clothing in her closet. Mentioning her trainer, Connor, with an ease that seemed unusual, she spoke of his advice on core strength and potential for competition fitness. It was clear to me what was transpiring, but what Whitney was unaware of was the unexpected discovery made 6 months prior to her gym membership activation. Her father, Gerald S.R., had passed away. This man, distant during my childhood and preoccupied with work, left a complicated legacy. He had been planning a trust fund, worth $470,000, managed by his attorney, Barrett. The conditions were precise. I couldn't tap into the principal until turning 38, still 2 years away. The fund was in existence, expanding unbeknownst to Whitney, hiding in accounts he was unaware of. My father's last letter, read to me by Barrett in that wood-paneled office, held one mandate: don't tell anyone. Regarding this money, keep it secret until you're sure they value you for who you are, not for your possessions. I learned this lesson too late. At the time, I thought it was paranoid. Now, I comprehend it as prophetic. I never disclosed the trust to Whitney. Not because I concealed it, at least initially, but because it didn't feel tangible yet. I couldn't touch it, spend it, or even view the statements without requesting them from Barrett's office. It lived in a different realm from our marriage. However, when Whitney started returning home from the gym with a cologne that wasn't mine, I made a choice. I contacted Barrett and asked a pointed question. If my spouse files for divorce, is this trust fund considered shared property? His response altered everything. In contrast to common belief, Whitney wasn't born into wealth, but rather enjoyed a comfortable upbringing. Her parents made shrewd investments in tech stocks during the 90s and cashed out before the market crash. During our engagement discussions, her father Randall requested a prenuptial agreement. I recall this conversation vividly as it took place at their house over Sunday dinner, with Randall discussing it privately in his study. His words were clear. Gerald, despite your seeming goodness, Whitney's mother and I have worked hard to secure our daughter's future. We'd feel more comfortable if certain assets remained untouched. The prenuptial agreement was simple. Any inheritance or gift we received would be kept as separate property, not divisible in case of divorce. At that point, I had no possessions worth protecting. My relationship with my father was strained, so I signed it without much deliberation, prioritizing Whitney's family's peace over understanding the agreement's implications. The prenuptial agreement served as a silent threat in Act 1. During the 4th month of Whitney's gym fixation, I had discovered her affair. Previously, we had talked 3 times regarding her trust fund with Barrett, who clarified that, according to the prenuptial agreement, my inheritance was off-limits. However, there was a condition: all marital assets must be disclosed during divorce proceedings. The trust fund wasn't included as a marital asset since it was an inherited property protected by our prenuptial agreement. I wondered if I should inform Whitney about it. Barrett hesitated before answering, stating that I needed to disclose any assets acquired during the marriage. He explained that the trust had been established through my father's will prior to marrying Whitney, making it technically separate property, as confirmed by our prenuptial agreement. Most lawyers would advise full disclosure to prevent charges of fraud, but legally there was no need for me to mention it. If she fails to inquire about crucial details, and her lawyer neglects to demand your full financial background, including inheritances, then you're not compelled to disclose information regarding secure separate assets. I mulled over that discussion for 2 months. I observed Whitney arriving home later and later. Saw her beam at her phone in ways she no longer did towards me. watched as she orchestrated her departure while maintaining a facade of normalcy. But I made my decision. Whitney filed in March, a fact I recall because it was the week following our anniversary, an occasion marked by her scarcely looking up from her phone and constant checking. Her attorney was a woman named Hastings, sharp and meticulous. The petition was concise, citing irreconcilable differences, proposing the division of community property, and requesting spousal support given that Whitney had foregone professional prospects to manage our household. That last point almost prompted a chuckle. For 3 years, Whitney worked part-time as a marketing coordinator before leaving to prioritize personal wellness, which I initially perceived as indicative of happiness. However, I later learned it was to spend more time with Connor. To address the situation, I engaged a lawyer named Coleman, a seasoned professional known for his careful approach and penchant for asking questions before offering answers. In our initial consultation, I detailed the entire affair, timeline, and trust fund. Coleman inquired, "Do you wish to contest every aspect?" I responded negatively, expressing my desire to appear utterly defeated, hoping she believed she had triumphed. Coleman displayed surprise. "That's an unconventional tactic," he said. "The trust fund is safeguarded, correct, by the prenuptial agreement." I confirmed. "It's indeed protected as separate property inherited before marriage," I added. "However, if her lawyer requests financial statements, you'll need to disclose it. But if they don't specifically request inheritance records," Coleman comprehended then. "If only the required current account statements and income documentation are provided, without any mention of inheritances or trusts, then that would fulfill their request. Nothing more, nothing less." Coleman nodded slowly, saying he wanted to proceed in this manner. He cautioned that it could potentially lead to issues if they were found out later, such as accusations of fraudulent asset concealment. However, he emphasized that he was not hiding marital assets, but merely not disclosing separate property that is legally protected under the prenup. Coleman had contemplated this for 6 months, while the divorce lasted 4 months. Whitney's lawyer asked for his current bank statements, employment records, and credit reports, to which he provided everything asked. This included all known joint accounts, checking and savings, as well as his personal checking account with direct deposits from the logistics company. The trust fund was not disclosed because it wasn't inquired about by Whitney's lawyer. The disclosure form on financial matters included a section for gifts and inheritances received during marriage. However, Barrett had set up the trust fund payout to occur after my 38th birthday, which was still 8 months away, so technically, I hadn't received anything. In the settlement, Whitney was given the house that I had been paying a mortgage on for 6 years, as well as her own car, personal accounts, and half of our joint savings amounting to approximately $42,000. She requested spousal support, but Coleman managed to negotiate it down to 18 months of small payments due to the brief duration of our marriage and Whitney's ability to work independently. I retained my car, retirement account from work, and personal checking account. On paper, she emerged as the winner. She got the house, the better vehicle, the cash settlement. The day we finalized the documents, I encountered her in the parking lot outside Coleman's office, where she portrayed me as financially unsuccessful, predictable, and defeated, exactly as she had always insinuated. She chuckled on her phone. I heard her announce from the window that, "It's completed." He didn't resist anything. "We can inspect houses by the next month." Alongside Connor, planning their future with what she perceived as a triumph, I remained in my car, waiting for the rage to manifest. However, I felt composed instead, cold perhaps. 3 months later, as I turned 38, I met with Barrett to examine the trust fund at last. The sum of $470,000 had grown from the initial inheritance, the result of shrewd investments over 2 years. "What's your plan for this?" Barrett inquired while explaining the account layout. "I intend to purchase a house, begin anew, and perhaps embark on that trip to New Zealand I've desired since college. My ex-wife is unaware of these plans. She never expressed curiosity about inheritances. Her lawyer never sought those records, and the prenuptial agreement her father emphasized safeguards it as separate property." Barrett slightly returned a smile. "Your father would have found the irony amusing. Timing," he often emphasized, "was crucial in finance." I moved $200,000 into a fresh account for the house purchase, leaving the remainder for retirement. For the first time in a year, I felt I could take a deep breath. Yet, True contentment arrived 6 weeks later. As I inspected properties in a more affluent district, Coleman rang. "There's an issue, or rather Whitney has a problem," he said. "What happened?" She filed a motion to adjust spousal support, claiming financial distress and the need for increased payments due to your alleged failure to disclose income during the divorce. Her attorney uncovered your purchase of a house in Grayson Heights in cash for $320,000, and she's accusing you of asset concealment and fraud during the divorce proceedings. My stomach sank at his words. The trust fund is secure, I know that, but now we must prove it. Judge Torres has scheduled a financial hearing for next month. Gather all documents concerning that inheritance. Each document, every correspondence from your father's estate, and all proof pointing towards this being separate property were gathered during the following 4 weeks. Barrett provided the complete trust documentation, including my father's will, the papers showing the establishment of the trust 8 months before I married Whitney, and bank statements demonstrating that the inheritance was never mixed with marital funds. Coleman structured our defense around a single, straightforward fact. The prenuptial agreement dictated by Whitney's father clearly classified inheritances as separate property. The court hearing was set for Tuesday morning. I arrived at the courthouse wearing my best suit, carrying a folder Barrett had organized with color-coded tabs. Whitney sat on the other side of the courtroom with Hastings, and for the first time since I knew her, she seemed unsure. The newcomer in the room was Connor, seated in the gallery. He'd shortened his hair, wore an ill-fitting jacket. He frequently looked at Whitney, as if waiting for approval to be there. Judge Torres, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, had a face that suggested she'd witnessed every trick, deceit, and desperate move. She examined the motion before addressing me. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "your ex-wife alleges you hid significant assets during your divorce hearings. She seeks enhanced spousal support and reimbursement for her legal fees related to this motion." Turning to me, she asked, "How do you counter?" Rising, Coleman replied, "My client disclosed all marital assets as required, Your Honor. The account in dispute is a trust fund set up by his late father, which was explicitly defined as separate property under the prenuptial agreement that Your Honor's own family advocated for." Hastings stood as well, responding, "The timing, Your Honor, appears suspicious. Mr. Whitmore acquired a house with cash 6 months post-divorce, yet claimed limited assets during proceedings. You suspect he intentionally hid information to achieve a favorable outcome? That's what I gathered from your statement. Did you demand inheritance records during discovery?" Torres inquired. Hastings seemed uncertain. "We requested up-to-date financial statements and income documents. Did you particularly request details about inheritances, trusts, or estates?" The standard disclosure forms encompassed such information, if I recall correctly. "No, Your Honor," Torres addressed me. "Mr. Whitmore, when did you acquire control over this trust fund?" 3 months following the finalization of the divorce, Your Honor. It was on my 38th birthday. The terms of my father's estate didn't permit access before that time. Also, when was the trust created? 8 months prior to my marriage with Whitney, Your Honor. Torres scrutinized the prenup carefully, taking her time. The courtroom remained quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and a phone vibrating in the audience. Whitney tightly grasped the table edge, her knuckles turned white. Eventually, Torres spoke up. "Ms., did the prenuptial agreement mention this trust fund or its establishment?" Hastings, your client's prenuptial agreement specifies that any inherited assets are exempt from division. It appears this agreement was drafted by your client's father. Is that correct? Affirmative, Your Honor. However, during the discovery phase, no questions pertaining to inheritances were posed, despite these details being explicitly mentioned in the prenuptial agreement. Given the comprehensive financial disclosure provided by Mr. Whitmore and his attorney, we did not omit information, but rather failed to ask relevant questions, which isn't considered fraud, Counselor. It's an issue of inadequate discovery. I observed Whitney grow pale, leaning towards Hastings with a sense of urgency and anger. Connor fidgeted in his seat, looking uneasy. Torres continued, "Mr. Whitmore, I will now direct a straightforward question to you. In the course of our marriage, did you ever mix funds from this trust with marital resources? Did you utilize this inheritance to cover shared expenses, acquire joint possessions, or deposit it into common accounts?" To which I reply, Your Honor, no. I was unable to access the trust until post-divorce. My father's legal representative handled it independently. Also, Mrs. Whitmore, were you cognizant of your father mandating a prenuptial contract that safeguarded inheritances? Whitney whispered, Yes. Did you comprehend its implications? I assumed it meant his inheritance would be immune to my kinfolk if we parted ways. It secures both parties' inheritances, as stated in legal documents. Isn't that correct? Torres shut the folder. Motion declined. Mr. Whitmore accurately disclosed all matrimonial assets. The trust fund was never a marital asset. It was individual property according to your prenuptial agreement, formed before marriage and unattainable until after divorce. If your lawyer neglected to inquire about protected assets during the discovery phase, that's not considered fraud. It's a mistake on their part. Ms. Hastings attempted to reinforce this point again. Your Honor, it is essential that parties respond truthfully to questions according to the essence of disclosure. Mr. Whitmore complied with this requirement. What you seem to be suggesting is that he should have disclosed information that was legally protected and which you had not requested. That's not how the process of discovery functions. Ms. Torres looked at Mrs. Whitney. I am denying your appeal for an augmentation in spousal support directly, Mrs. Whitmore. The settlement you received was fair, considering the actual marital assets. Your ignorance about your ex-husband's separate property does not entitle you to additional funds. Motion denied. Case concluded. The gavel fell. I rose up, shook hands with Coleman, and left the courtroom without looking back. 2 weeks following the swift scrape of Whitney's chair, Hastings muttering in hushed tones, and Connor querying with uncertainty, Coleman diverted me discreetly. The most refined demolition I've witnessed in family court over 15 years, he remarked. The prenuptial agreement was the instrument of destruction. No, your restraint played a role. You allowed her to believe she had triumphed, never offering her any incentive to probe deeper. Few can endure such humiliation without retaliation, but I learned from my father. He often said that the most effective revenge is allowing people to self-destruct. Subsequently, I acquired the property in Grayson Heights, boasting 3 bedrooms, a modernized kitchen, and a verdant backyard with real trees, a type of dwelling Whitney had previously pointed out in property magazines, saying someday. Rumor has it that mutual acquaintances, those who subtly contacted after the divorce, informed me that Whitney and Connor parted ways. The house they intended to purchase jointly relied on her alimony payments and additional settlement funds she anticipated receiving from me. When the court denied her petition, the financing collapsed. She returned to live with her parents. Randall, who had vigorously advocated for the prenup safeguarding my inheritance, reportedly cut off contact with her. Connor resumed instructing clients at the gym, where several wives halted bookings after hearing about the affair. I rarely ponder them now. On certain evenings, I sit in my yard with a beer, gazing at the stars above my new home, and reflect upon my father's letter. Wait to disclose this wealth until you're sure they value you for who you are, not what you possess. He shielded me from afar, even beyond his demise, and the trust fund was never about the money. It was about unveiling the truth. Whitney cherished what I symbolized: dependability, predictability, someone who wouldn't contest her when she craved more. When she believed there was no more to claim, she seized what was available and departed. Yet, she never genuinely loved me. Not the genuine person I was, not enough to persist when things grew mundane, not enough to pose insightful inquiries. The prenuptial agreement my father compelled me to sign was intended to safeguard her inheritance from men like me. Stable, unremarkable, financially average. Instead, it shielded my inheritance from women such as her. I don't take pleasure in any of this. I don't feel validated or superior. I merely feel tranquil, as if the clamor in my life has ceased forever. Last week, I received an email from Barrett. My father's estate had one last asset to disperse, a letter specifically composed to be handed over after I claimed the trust fund. I went to his workplace, where he gave me an envelope. Inside, in my father's meticulous handwriting, it read, Gerald, if you're reading this, you've reached your 38th birthday and accessed the trust. I hope it has aided you in creating something genuine. Additionally, I hope that you learned what I did too late. Money uncovers character. It doesn't build or transform it, merely exposing what was already present. If you are alone at this moment, remember that solitude with integrity is preferable to companionship with someone who undervalues your worth. You are always deserving of more than you thought. I am sorry for not expressing that often enough. Dad, I kept the letter, framed it, and placed it in my home office next to the picture of him from his workshop, the only image showing him smiling. Whitney married me for stability, but left when she found excitement. She never inquired about my father's estate because she believed there was nothing worth asking about. She didn't exert herself more in the divorce as she believed she had already acquired everything significant. However, she was mistaken about all aspects. The trust fund procured me a house, security, a new beginning. Yet, the true gift my father bestowed upon me was the opportunity to perceive distinctly, to comprehend precisely what I was worth to someone who professed love for me. At times, the finest retribution isn't sensational unmasking or public disgrace. Sometimes it's merely thriving in a house another considered their due while they grapple with understanding their true losses. Here's to Cheating Story Lab. If this tale resonates with you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it. Occasionally, the best justice is the kind that arrives silently after the verdict is pronounced.